So it's about time to start.
You're recording?
Yep, I got the button going. So welcome to the Continuous Collaboration in LAMP Applications with Probo.CI session. Whoops. Basically, we're going to go over what Probo.CI is, how it came to be, and a bunch of practical live examples. So we'll see how that goes. After that, we'll have some QA time at the end, hopefully, and can answer your questions. So, introductions. My name is Jason Moore. I'm a systems engineer at Zivtech in Philadelphia. You can find me as the user Skills on just about anything online. And this is actually my first presentation. I've done a lot of events, trainings, but this is actually my first time presenting, so my 7th grade English teacher would be so proud of me right now for public speaking. So a little bit about where I work. Work at Zivtech. We are a full-service web shop located in Center City. We specialize in Drupal development, NodeJS development, and pretty much anything open source and web related. We originally developed Probo as a in-house testing tool that eventually pretty much most of the product got open sourced for public consumption on GitHub. So that's enough about me and where I work, so let's get down to business. So in today's session, we're going to go over what is Probo.CI, what is continuous collaboration, how can Probo.CI improve your workflow, and some live Probo.CI examples, and we'll do some Q&A. So what is Probo.CI? Probo.CI is an open source continuous integration tool. It's also a software as a service platform for running tests. Most importantly, it's a continuous collaboration tool for your whole team that allows allows your team to develop, test, and deploy code faster without hitting common process bottlenecks. So what are these common process bottlenecks? Code review, automated testing, visual regressions, merge conflicts, client review, change requests, and then we rinse and repeat this ad hominem. So typically, the beginner Git workflow is to create a repository. You have a master branch. You might have a development branch, production branch. Typically, your code goes from what you're working on into production, maybe just to master. This works to some degree, but not great for larger teams. Hopefully, looking around here, I'm pretty sure everybody here is using Git or something in terms of a version control system, so my last statement here isn't as good for this one, for this crowd. But hopefully anybody that's not using version control in this crowd will see why at the end of this session it should be. So a better workflow is a feature branch workflow. This allows multiple developers to work on the same code base in parallel and not step on each other's toes. Feature branches can be reviewed individually in pull requests, and then those pull requests are merged into master or production. So this works great until there are multiple changes going on, multiple pull requests, and you have your dev site where everybody's kind of trying to see their latest changes. This could be a major process bottleneck or a major blocker in a sprint, or it can postpone your deployments, or it can cause other unplanned problems. This brings us to Exhibit 1, the missing demo site. So the lead dev needs a demo site, asks one of the developers to set up a new demo site for a client at 3 p.m. the next day. The lead needs a specific Git branch or pull request loaded up with a specific DB that has some nodes and some blocks and stuff like that you need for the demo. And once you got it set up, you actually added a few more nodes on the dev site, we'll say. Hey, that wasn't so bad. The dev got it set up before they went home from work that day. everything's good to go, we're ready for the demo. Project manager checks in the next day, just to make sure everything's good. Dev thinks everything's still good, but hasn't really double-checked. But the dev double-checks with the PM, makes sure he saw his ping last night, saying, I got that done last night, so should be good. But the PM notices some problems. That one node that's supposed to be there isn't there. The blocks aren't there. Looks like the live site for some reason. Wonder what that could be. So the PM messages the lead dev just to make sure they double check to make sure everything is either good or bad. Lead dev's kind of busy, so they can probably take a look at it in like 30 minutes or so. So the lead dev finally is able to check in on the situation and finds that, yes, the site is not in the state that it needs to be in for the demo. They're a little confused because they did see the chat message that it was done. So what happened? What? The lead dev, or not the lead dev, but the dev's a little confused at this point. They know that they did this work. They build time or clock time for it. So what happened? The dev investigates the problem. Turns out another dev came in that morning, checked out their branch they were working on, and checked out a new database from live, or dumped a new database from live. So you lost all your demo content. They must not have seen the HipChat message or the Slack message that stated that the demo site's ready to go in this state. Luckily, the dev is smart and made a backup after he got this all set up. So it shouldn't be that bad to get it set back up. The lead dev is a little frustrated, not sure how this could happen a few hours before the client's going to show up for this demo. So we start to think of ways that we can avoid this in the future. PM is fearing the deadline. Client's going to be here in 2 hours. Currently, the dev site is in no way, shape, or form to be a demo for the client. Do we have enough time to get it back up and running before they get here? The dev feels the pressure. Feeling the pressure, the dev hurries up and gets the site back online. Luckily, they had that backup, so they were able to get all the nodes and blocks set up again real quick. The PM hopes it's right at this point because we've already gone through 2 iterations basically to try to get this working, and at this point the client is probably about an hour out from being at the office to have this live demo. The lead dev checks on everything again, makes sure everything's cool, everything looks good now. Thanks to the dev for getting it back up so quickly. The lead dev is confident. The lead is pretty sure this is going to go off without a hitch. The client is going to love these changes. We can probably get approval on the call, and we'll be able to deploy these tonight. But the client hasn't reviewed it yet. This is possibly something that people in this room may have had happen to them, but maybe your client wants changes. So the call went great. Client liked pretty much everything they saw, but they want to make a few changes before we deploy this. So this whole process has to start all over again. The dev sits there with their best poker face for the client and thanks them for coming today, and we'll get right back on that. The dev gives their best poker face as the client leaves the conference room. So how do we solve these problems? All of this could have been avoided with a better workflow. We need to amplify a feedback loop to make it easier to get feedback before Git merges. We want to enforce a development-driven development process and prioritize frequent and easy code deployments. We want to complement automated testing with visual regression testing, behavioral development testing, etc. By doing this, we increase productivity by prioritizing quality work. Enter Probo.CI. Probo was developed originally as an internal tool to remove these major process bottlenecks we found when developing websites at Zivtech. We found over time that more of an active collaboration with clients achieved better results. Why is this collaboration so important? What are the benefits of collaboration? First of all, it improves quality. Typically, it involves non-technical stakeholders, and it doesn't require meetings. This saves a lot of time and allows the developers to continue work more efficiently. So what is continuous collaboration? Continuous collaboration is where all members of the development project are working together at a higher rate of interaction to gain feedback and complete work faster. Developers are rarely blocked by other work that's going on. Project managers are able to review progress easily. Testing and feedback are not just for technical staff, and non-technical stakeholders are able to review changes on the fly. Here we have a graphic that we put together that's kind of a flowchart of what a typical pull request or feature request would go through in Probo. First, we would have a feature be submitted and a pull request is created. It then goes to a Probo build, which runs a bunch of steps. If those steps fail, you get a notification right in the GitHub UI or Bitbucket UI, whichever one you're using. And that can go right back to the developer to get the bugs fixed and sent back through. Once the tests pass, you can send it over to review for the lead dev or project lead or some other stakeholder for the client. Once everything's signed off on, the lead reviews the changes and merges them to deploy to production. Probo is integrated with Bitbucket and GitHub out of the box. We also have integration levels for Bitbucket server for some subscription levels. We're also in the process of working on a GitLab integration. There are some other cool sandbox systems out there in the Drupal space. Platform.sh, Pantheon's multi-dev, especially with the CircleCI integration. Tugboat, Open Dev Shop, or you can roll your own. And this is kind of where Probo came from. And we wrote our own and then decided it was worthwhile to show everybody else what we were doing. So let's take a look at our new continuous collaboration workflow with Probo.CI. The lead assigns a ticket. The devs are happy to help. They really dig this new Probo workflow. The dev thinks and codes their way to completing the changes required in the ticket. Dev opens up a pull request. Probo builds its sandbox. The dev shares a link that Probo spits out, and they can give that to the PM, the client, or other stakeholders on the project. PM likes what they see. They can easily send the work over to a client with just a URL, and things are speeding up on the end of getting changes reviewed. The client sees that it's right. They get a URL that everybody on the project can share as one, and every time that the changes get pushed up to this build, they can check the new URL or the existing permanent link to see how the changes are going. The lead devs approves and merges the changes. Projects start running smoothly. Demos are going off without a hitch now. All team members rejoice. The new workflow is amazing. So, without QA sandboxes, testing environments have a mix of changes that are not yet vetted by your clients. Previewing a feature branch is complex. Useful test content gets lost before feedback comes in from clients. This is what I was showing in Exhibit 1. So with QA sandboxes, we get testing environments that only have work approved by the client and is always ready to deploy. Reviewing is easy and not bottlenecked by other developers or other process bottlenecks. Test content needed for review doesn't get wiped. And deployment steps have always been verified. So, let's get into some live ProboCI examples. Basically, I'm going to go through some examples here that are either we do at Zivtech or we've seen client or customers doing on Probo, or just some other APIs that I've looked up and found that we can integrate with pretty easily, specifically for this session. So, some practical examples that I'm going to show off here. GitHub integration, Bitbucket integration, it turns out that we not only support Git with Bitbucket, but we also support Mercurial, the way that our Bitbucket handler works. So that's kind of a bonus. I'm going to show off the main Probo plugins that we have currently for basically spinning up a fully integrated config based on the CMS that you're using, or just a general LAMP application. You can run automated tests, so we'll show off a BHAT test, and you can integrate with a bunch of other APIs. So we'll show off a backtrack.io test, which is a visual regression test, tenon.io test, which is a accessibility testing tool, and I've also got a Netlify integration set up to have an automated deployment set up. You can also post build notifications back to your chat of choice. So we have JIRA, which isn't really chat, but it's just different communication stacks that you can connect to. So I have a JIRA API connect and a Slack API connect that I have examples for, and I have a bunch of other various Probo.YAML examples. So for the Git integration, you basically go off through GitHub or Bitbucket to get started. You then, if you're familiar with Circle.ci or other tools, that you can basically go in and enable a repository and sync up all the new repositories you have in your account. From there, each pull request that you've enabled on an enabled repository creates a new testing sandbox inside the Probo app. And then from there, each commit to that pull request creates a new build within the sandbox that you can then see your latest changes. You can view the progress in your pull request itself. Underneath the pull request, it'll show off what steps you're kicking off and their status. And if you have a silver plan or up, you can actually connect to Bitbucket server as well. As I mentioned, there's also Mercurial integration for Bitbucket. Basically the same process by OAuthing in and everything like that, and it has the same workflow and features as the Git integration currently. So next we have the Probo plugins. We have a script plugin, which essentially allows you to run bash commands and bash scripts, multiple line commands in your build. So if you need to run some sort of installation of a package or something like that, you can do that on top of your build. We also have a LAMP plugin that gives you some basic options to configure a LAMP application. So you can connect to a database, you can set up your doc root, things like that. We also have a Drupal plugin, which integrates a bunch of Drupal-specific settings. So you can change some you can add lines to your settings.php file. You can run drush commands and a bunch of other things on top of that, which are Drupal-specific. And then might get some weird faces in here, but we also have a WordPress plugin that allows you to easily spin up a WordPress site, and it integrates with the WordPress CLI tool. We also can integrate with a bunch of other APIs. So we have a backtrack.io example, which is a great tool for automated visual regression testing. We also have an example for tenon.io, which is an automated accessibility testing tool. I've integrated a few of the repos that I'm working with Travis.ci, just to show that as a integration. And I believe somewhere in the mix here I have a Circle.ci integration. If not, it definitely can. I might not have gotten that example ready. And I also have a Netlify example that basically allows you to set up an automated deployment through that system. So you can have, maybe you have like a Gatsby site or some other static site that you build, that you can launch that directly on Netlify right through your build process. So let me jump out here, and I'm going to start doing some examples. So just to let everybody know, there's a GitHub project GitHub organization called Probo Demos, and these are where I have all these demos I'm going to show today. They're all publicly available, so you can fork them, change them, try it out all you want. So let's get into some actual examples here. So let's start with Drupal 8 first. So this particular repository is not anything too special. It's just a Drupal 8.5 installation. This particular repository is built with Composer.
Your screen.
Oh, sorry.
Just mirror it.
I have some technical difficulties. All right, that should be a little better. Maybe. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so can you guys see that better?
Yep.
I'll blow it up a little bit. Okay, so this is just a typical Drupal 8 installation using Composer to build the project. So right now, does not have a Probo configuration file in it. So what I did was I created pull requests, and I've added the Probo YAML file. And we can take a look at what's in that file here. So this particular file is calling an image. We have several images that you can pull as your base image to give you the closest configuration to your production environment. You can add assets. This particular build, I'm adding an environment variable file that I'm defining some environment variables. And you can also run steps like, here's one of the script commands that allows you to, this one is updating Composer. I'm requiring a specific version of Drush here due to the 8.4.5 update. And then we're building the site out here by installing the Composer packages. And then here we're using the Drupal plugin that allows us to run the site install. We're using the standard profile. And you can also do things like clear your caches, or if it was an existing site and you had configuration that you wanted to import, you can also import configuration. And then in this particular case, since I set this up with the Drupal Composer project, it has the web directory as the doc root. So you can set the subdirectory for your site here. So this particular pull request, let me get back to my... So down here we have the actual checks that it ran on Probo. And this is the logs that I was talking about that you can actually see in the GitHub interface here. And these are the steps that I have defined in my YAML file. So if we click the details, this brings us over to the Probo app. And this is what you'd see basically on any pull request that you have in Probo.
Hey Jason,
Yeah.
you want to ask a question?
So,
How did Probo become aware of that repo? Did you have to sign
Right,
create an
so-
account first?
yeah, let me show you that real quick. So on the main page here, when you log in, you have an Activate Repos button.
Okay.
And this essentially calls out to GitHub and allows you to then enable, disable projects there.
Cool. Thank you.
So that's how that tells Probo that it's actually an active repository. And then once you add your Probo YAML file and submit a PR at that point, that's when it'll start kicking off
So it
builds.
doesn't even have to be in like your master branch or whatever you're working off of.
No,
It's
you
easy
can
to
completely, you can just have a PR where you want to test it out and show people that it
PR. Oh,
works.
that's awesome.
You don't have to even have it in your master, no. So let me get back to my build here. So from the build page here, you can get back to the exact commit that you had on GitHub. You can jump to the pull request. You can view the branch itself. And then you can also, if you need to, for some reason, you can rebuild this right here in the UI. We also have a pin build feature where if you want to keep this build around, basically the way that the accounts work, if you notice here that it says that I'm using X out of 15 gigabytes here, the accounts on Probo are based by the total size of your projects. So if you want to do, if I didn't pin this and we created some new builds, eventually this build will get deleted to keep you under your space limits. If you were to pin this build, it will be the last build to try. If you end up getting to a point where you're going to run out of space, it will be the last build that gets deleted.
You don't normally care like if they get deleted because you can just rebuild them, but
Yeah.
But if you're putting in test content, then you might want to pin it.
When you pin it and you make another commit, does it still keep that pin there and
Yeah.
it won't rebuild unless
Right.
you unpin it?
Yeah, it'll keep that pin, and then you can keep working on the PR and keep pushing new commits, but
So
you
if
can
have
still.
to demo something
Yep.
on your branch, but you still want to do
Exactly.
work, you could save that environment.
Mhm.
Nice.
So in these steps that are shown on the Probo interface, you can actually expand each step and see what the log responses were. So we can see here how we're building out our whole site, and then we're doing the site install process, and it actually gave us an admin and user password here. So if I go up to the view site link, this is going to bring us over to the actual site that's built in the container. Oh, good. Oh boy. I broke it. I broke it.
Huh.
That's odd. Alright, well, let's try the rebuild feature.
While that's rebuilding, I have another question. Do you define Drupal as your plugin, and that grabs the Drupal install? Is that good for any version of Drupal? It's not going to try to pull a specific.
So on the Drupal plugin itself, there are a couple configuration options in the Drupal plugin that allow you to select like the Drupal version. Like you can actually define the Drupal version here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just another YAML config option that you can set. Typically, if you have the site already installed and you have the database and you're uploading the database as an asset and then just building from that, I don't think you really need to specify the version. But if you're just trying to build a site from scratch, it helps to set that, especially if you're trying to clear the caches and stuff, because that's where it's going to define that. If you're still in Drupal 7, you can revert features. And then on the Probo plugin page, we have a couple examples here that you can grab a couple snippets and get started. So let me go back to my... All right, so see if that actually rebuilt here. I broke that demo. All right. Somebody warned me about this, but okay. It worked yesterday. So anyway, if that should have basically built the site, but apparently I have
Take
an
out
error.
the --PR and see what you get.
Just on the no, it already killed it. You saying just go to the permanent?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I broke it. Oh well, we'll go to the next one. I have plenty. So this particular repository is a Drupal 7 site. Same idea. This one's very simple. It's just a generic Drupal 7 install. And this also does not have the Probo config file in it yet. So this is just a very, very vanilla Drupal 7 site. And over here, I've added a Probo YAML file. Let's do that. So in this one, again, I'm just using the Drupal plugin. I'm running the install. I've got the standard profile again. And what I'm doing here is actually, so each time I add an additional afterthought here once I got this configured properly. So each time I do a new commit on this, which I'll just do one right in the UI here. So I'm going to edit the Probo YAML, and I'm just going to make this kick off a new build by just doing a commit. And this particular build should take just a few seconds to finish. Hop over to our build. Everything passed. Now, the last step on this was actually to post to Slack. So I set up an API call in the last step there, and in our Probo room here, I have this Probo web notification app that I created, and it's posting back at 3:16 p.m. was when I just did that build. And the Probo has several environment variables that you can use out of the box. So I'm pulling in the build ID as well as the pull request URL and the actual build URL. It's the environment variable is actually build domain, but it pulls in the URL to our build. So if I wanted to share that, if somebody else was in that channel and they wanted to look at the site, they can already look at it.
It's working.
And this one works. Let's look at a few more that I have going here.
What about that tenant one? Does it
Yeah, that tenant one's got me interested.
Okay, let's do the 10-on-1. So this particular one, I believe I have a Drupal 8 site set up. It's essentially the same repo that I used for my Drupal 8 example, so hopefully it's not broken. But again, I've just got a simple PR here to add the Probo YAML, and it adds my steps here. So let's take a look at these steps. This particular one, I'm using the 1604 image with PHP 7.2. I'm updating Composer, I'm installing Drupal, and then in this particular last step, I'm using the script plugin to define a command here, which I'm posting a curl. Oops, don't look at that.
Well, this is only being recorded. Don't worry about it.
No, it's an API key that I can change. But for this particular example, yeah, take a look at it. Take a good look at it. No, but basically, I made this specifically for this example. So if you want to hack my example, go ahead. But basically, this is going to take this particular site and run it against the 10on.io test, which is a accessibility testing tool. So let's go ahead and just kick off a new build here by sending a commit up. And we'll go back over to here, and we'll see our steps kick off. Each one of the steps I've defined runs as a separate, basically a separate test that each step gets a check to make sure it exits with a pass or fail. If by chance one of these tests or one of these steps had a typo or a URL that doesn't exist, you'll end up getting a red X here instead of all these nice little green check marks. Yeah, Composer takes a little while sometimes. But we can still hop over to the build for now, and we can watch it all happen here. Currently, I don't think this automatically updates. We're working on WebSockets that'll allow this to update as the steps update.
GitHub will automatically update.
Yeah, the steps on GitHub will automatically update, but you have to refresh this page, which not so bad. So now we're doing all the Composer steps to install our site, and then we're installing Drupal now down here. And then our last step we are posting a curl URL that's using the build URL environment variable to tell Tenon what the URL is of this build, and then passes our API key to do the test. So I should see Probo.42.
Well, this is a backtrack, not
Oh, whoops, wrong one. So I should see a new test. Here we go. So my build is testing down here. This so it's got 1 total issues, 14 error density. I don't know what all this means yet. I'm still new to this tool, but it does integrate pretty well with our build process. And this has a bunch of tests from when I've done previous trying to get this working. So, but over on Probo here, if by chance when I jumped through too many hoops. We don't like that one.
We need some more tabs.
Yeah, I know. So, I got lost in my tabs here. Sorry. Alright. Okay. So, this last step that I had here, previously to this looking nice and pretty with just 2 commits here, I had some syntax errors that I was having. So the last step continually failed for a while until I got that fixed. So you will get a response back if you don't have it set up right. This won't always pass if you don't get the curl command right. But yeah, so you can use the Tenon tool. This reports back directly what your error density and warnings are here. I suppose you could pass that back through to something else in your testing suite if you wanted to somehow pass that information back to a Slack chat or something like that. That could also be another step that you could add on here. And you could probably save those as environment variables that you could pass back to your team that way. So I have a few more examples here. We saw the Slack example. I made one specifically for this to test it, but I think we got the idea of that. That one does not work too well. Okay, here's one. So I don't know if anybody here has used Gatsby yet, but it's a pretty cool site builder tool. I've barely touched it, but I wanted to build as many examples as I could here to show off other LAMP type solutions that you can add and test with here. So this particular demo, oops, is just building this particular site out. And let's take a look at what I did here. So this particular one is updating Node.js first, and then we're installing the dependencies for Gatsby, and then building the Gatsby site right in our build here. So let me take a look at our build on Probo. And this particular site, let's make sure it works. Okay. So this particular build isn't that complex. It's just an example to show off another site that you can test with in this. But let me do a quick.
Right, and also not PHP, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's not even PHP based. This one is like a Node.js based application. So let me, again, just show off how easy it is to change something in here. So I'm just going to kick off another build. And then we can see it go through all of the process, all the steps that we're doing on this particular build. Dependencies, fine. All right, well, those dependencies take a while. Okay. We'll go to another one while we're waiting. All right. So people in here probably used Behat before. If not, it's a way you can test sites through behavior-driven tests. So, like, as if you were a human testing the site, you would click on something and make sure that it works, or make sure a specific element is on the page. So this particular PR is one that's in our Bear project, which is a installation profile that we aren't really maintaining that much anymore, but we used a lot more in Drupal 7. But this particular PR is just updating a script in our repository, and we actually have this particular project set up to run some Behat tests to make sure when we change some things in our installation profile, it doesn't completely break everything. So let's take a look at what's happening here. Actually, let's just look at the YAML file first, because this one we actually do include the Probo YAML file in our main repository, because this is just we then run our pull requests and make our changes there, and then we can run the Behat test and make sure everything's cool before we push up to Drupal.org. So this one's updating Composer. It runs our profile install script, and then actually installs the site with our Bear profile, and then kicks off these Behat tests. So let me just kick off a new build for this one, and we can see the Behat tests start kicking off. So I'll hop back to my Gatsby site. It is now built according to the logs. And you can see pretty much anything that happens in your build process, you can get back in your log here. So every single dependency that is installed, we can verify. So if we go back to our site here, it's going to look the same, but it should still be working. All right, Gatsby's out of here. All right, so this is Steve's PR. So in this one, he just changed a file here, but let's take a look at the steps that ran here over on Probo. Excuse me. So down here, we run the site install. Everything's cool. We have an admin user with a password. We've set some file permissions, and we rebuilt the caches. And then we ran some Behat tests. So we can see here that as an administrator, I should be able to add a menu item, and it runs through these steps. If we had a fail in this process, Probo would come back with a fail response, and you would get that in the UI here and also in your build, or also in your steps that you see on GitHub. It also shows them on Bitbucket if you're using Bitbucket. So, going to the next one. Yeah. So this particular one, we've used Jekyll on a few like one-off sites, and we also use it for like our documentation site on Probo. So we've already been testing Jekyll sites with Probo for a little while. This one I set up so that it actually will build the Jekyll site and also kick off a Netlify build. So I've integrated this repo with the Netlify service. So what it's essentially doing is running the LAMP app here, testing it on Probo, getting everything set up, installing the site. I think that's on a different file. So this the Netlify integration isn't actually, it's just another integration that integrates directly with your repository. So when I kick off the build, it'll actually start another Netlify build. So let me do that. And I'm also kind of new to the Netlify service, but basically it allows you to set up sites to do automated deployments. So this particular Jekyll install that I have here will actually come up over here on Netlify as this site. So you can actually build automated deployments into Probo as well. If all your tests pass, you can then kick off a Netlify build. I have a few more examples, and then we can stop for some Q&A if anybody has questions. Oh, this one's a good one. So a lot of people in here may use something like JIRA to manage your projects. One thing that we found that we can do is actually post back information from our build back to a comment on a JIRA ticket. So this particular example that I have here is posting back to a JIRA ticket that we have. Whoops, I wanted to open that a different. Is posting back to a JIRA ticket that I set up for this demo. So there's already a couple comments in here that I've tested with. First one, I had some syntax errors. But basically, if I kick off another build here, well, let's take a look at what we have first. So this one I'm using the 1604 LAMP with PHP 7.1 image. We're actually uploading a database asset here. You can define the database asset file in your Drupal plugin, so you can use a specific state of your site, and that will always be the state that gets pulled in for every commit for that pull request. We're also including a site settings file, so we're requiring that file in our settings.php file, so we can have some additional site settings in code. And we're also defining our config sync directory, where we actually have our Drupal 8 configuration synced. We're running a bunch of drush commands here to clean up some stuff, and then down here we actually are posting to Backtrack, which is the visual regression testing tool that I spoke about earlier. And we're going to post a comment back to JIRA about those where we can find those tests. So let's kick off a new build here. No. And This one takes a minute to run because it's got a few steps.
Oh wow.
Well, it's getting which JIRA ticket to post to from the branch name.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of...
Going to Ziv 600.
Yeah, so based off of... So because I named this particular pull request branch Ziv-600, that's the JIRA ticket. That's how the script that we have, the script command that we have running is using the environment variables available with Probo to then take that and post information back to this ticket. So,
but we were naming our branches like that anyway because that lets JIRA put links to them. As well.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a win-win. Let me see where we're at. Yeah, this one takes a little bit longer to run, so I am going to... I think I have one more good example here. Oh. Who'd have thunk it? So I have a WordPress example. I don't know if anybody in here is interested in that, but it works really great. This particular one, I just have a generic WordPress site. I think it's WordPress 8. I don't know. But it's the latest version of WordPress. I've run a couple tests on this one over time just to see how certain things worked. I'm not a WordPress developer, so I wasn't really keen on their CLI tool and some other things. So I did some tests. This particular PR is adding the Probo YAML and then checks the WP CLI version and checks a few other things. So I don't know if that's the one I want. I think I want this one. Yeah, okay. So here's the actual Probo YAML file for that. I actually installed WordPress locally and then just exported the DB. So I had a DB asset that I could upload. I checked the WP CLI version because there were some weirdness on the database correlation. And I updated it because the version that we have on this particular image is actually kind of old. So you can actually run other script commands to upgrade a package if you feel that it's not the right version you need. And then we have the WordPress app, which is similar to the Drupal app, or the Drupal plugin, that allows you to define some WordPress-specific configuration options. So we have one important one to note for a WordPress site is this dev domain. For some reason, they save the base URL in their database on every table.
They never thought you would ever change the URL.
Yeah. So for us to get around that with Probo, we've defined these two options where you essentially just give us what you set your local site name to be, or if it's your production URL, you would put that in here. And then we have the WP CLI flushing the caches on this. So if this is going to work for me, I'm going to kick off a new build. We'll let that run. Let's see if this one's done. Cool. Alright, so the last step in this one is to post back. So let's just verify all this information is correct. So this last step should post back a comment in JIRA about the backtrack IO URL, as well as a few other parts to our build here. So let's take a look at what we actually got here. So we've got a comment added 2 minutes ago where we have a Probo build at this build URL. If we click that, it's going to take us to the URL that anybody on the team can review. Let's see if it works. Hey, there we go. So this particular build gave us the build URL, and we also have a visual regression test back at backtrack. So we can go right over to that, and it's still running. The backtrack tests take a little while to run because it has to run through whatever URLs you define. So we have a total of 82 URLs that we test on this project. You can define whatever I guess we're limited to 120 on this account, but depending on your account's level, you can test a ton of sites. So that's going to run, and that'll let us know. Basically, you give it a screenshot of the pages that you want it to look like, and then it does a visual regression test against that to see what your changes were. So my other one was the WordPress example. So let's just make sure that worked. All checks have passed. You can check out our details over here. And we see that everything installed properly. We got the WordPress site set up. You see the whole install process here, and it flushed our caches. So at this point, we should be able to go over to the WordPress site. And there you go. This particular demo was done for WordCamp Philly, but it's reusable. So I think we're just about at the time. So I'm gonna, I think, cut it here in terms of the demos and open it up to Q&A. Anybody? Go ahead.
So it looked like you were providing some SQL dumps as part of the repo. There's no reason that you couldn't use that script plugin to run like a drush command to rsync files and databases.
Very good question. We actually have a command line tool that we built. It's on the docs. Where is it? Is it plugin? No.
Asset manager? Assets?
Yeah, assets. Okay. So we have the ProboUploader, which you can actually add to your server or into.
So it's not in the repo.
Yeah. So you can use like Jenkins or some other thing to like kick off from a webhook. You could download the latest database, dump it, sanitize it, and upload it with the ProboUploader every time you do a build if you really want to.
Yeah, scroll
Could also
down.
do something like Chunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an npm package. So npm install ProboUploader, and then you get a token in your actual. Whoop! Don't close that. You get a token in the project over here. So these are all the builds we have. Those are all open PRs that haven't been merged yet. And then here's where you can define your build assets. So you can upload your database here. You can upload, we have like a credentials file here, env file. It could be just about anything here. And then you can call those assets in your build by using a environment variable we provide.
Cool.
And yeah, so this is where you define the upload token. So this upload token, you copy this, put it into your ProboUploader command, and then you essentially can use this command line to upload your assets.
Just start keeping track of all the tokens that you're going to delete at the end of this. Jason, do you have any demonstrations of going into Terminus in an actual Probo command, so it just gets the latest database from Pantheon?
I don't have any Pantheon ones. I'm going to work on that.
Okay.
That was like one of the things that I was like on my list of things, but I didn't get that far.
Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, I'd love to have as many examples as we can put up on that repository, the better.
But that's
Cool.
so you don't even need to worry about the asset upload, which is
Or you notice that does the pull request automatically deploy to like so where's the difference? What happens when the difference between the lead dev tests and the client tests?
There's essentially, so the pull request itself is kind of your bucket, so to speak, of where all the changes for that come together. So the way Probo does it is that pull request gets its own sandbox, and then any commits that you send to that PR go to that sandbox, and it'll just keep rolling that sandbox over and over and over until you're done. And then every time the commit gets sent up, it rebuilds the sandbox with the config options that you define in the YAML file and the database that you chose and whatever other configuration you want to throw on top and tests. And each time you send a commit up, it rebuilds that PR in that state. So you're basically always in a state of reviewable.
I get that. So does the client has a URL, or they have like a account where they say, oh, this is the pull request, this is the, so how does the client actually give the thumbs up?
I think the development team or the PM would reach out saying this is the link.
Yeah, essentially, you'd send the link to your project manager or your lead dev, and they'd sign off on the changes internally, and then you could just email the link or however you're contacting your client, and just give them that URL, and they essentially just contact you back, and your lead then goes into to GitHub and merges it.
But we do have like a whole new idea we want to build of like adding like a way for them to do some level of review like right on the build. So they wouldn't have to then like go back to JIRA or go back to an email, respond it was good, and they could like make comments on certain places or say that it was approved right in.
Yeah, that's actually in the works right now of like design. But yeah, these URLs, there's a permalink. Like each one of the builds that gets built inside this PR. Let me see if this one has any that have like additional.
You could probably even write a script to send an email to your client.
Yeah. But none of these particular builds have like multiple. Maybe this one will have it. No, but essentially, if this particular if this particular one of these PRs had multiple commits against it, and we didn't want, and there would be additional builds you could look back at here in like a history. So you can see like yesterday we pushed this one up and it looked weird. You can rebuild that and take a look at that whole thing all over again.
Like a restore point.
And then you essentially just get this URL, the view site link here. This is what you'd share with the client, and it gives them some indication of what it is here in the PR number. But there's also a permalink that should be, I think it's the latest build on this PR will always be this permalink. So you can actually just send them that and say like, check it after check it at the end of the day or whatever. So that's kind of, I guess, based on their workflow with the client a little bit. How you want to have them sign off on and deployments and stuff. But essentially, you're sending them a link, they're getting back to you, and then your devs can then deploy the changes however you work with that workflow. Cool. Anybody else? Questions?
Yeah, the way I'm seeing is like really want it to be like a tool for like less technical people to be able to like easily give feedback, because I think there's such a huge market for that. Like so many of our clients, it's like they're in marketing or something, and it's like the website is really important to them, but at the same time there's a lot of aspects of their job, and like you can't really expect them to learn how to use JIRA boards and understand like all the ins and outs of like what you're doing. So you really just
put JIRA in an iframe and you'll be fine.
Yeah, a lot of this came about based on just things that we always like, repeating things that happened in our own organization that we're like, why would we want to keep doing it that way? And it was like, now we have to get them a JIRA account, and now we have to get them a Slack account, and now we have to get them whatever they need. But if we can just send them this URL in an email, or if it is Slack or whatever we're using with them, to send a quick message like, hey, it's ready, then you don't have to have these overarching, you can still have a sprint, but you don't have to have like an overarching huge day where like everything goes into production and all, like everything. It's kind of like, I'll give an analogy that I didn't actually use, but it's kind of like craft beers, where it's like small batches make it better, where like smaller batches of code make better quality code. So the smaller pieces allow you to make the changes that you want faster and be able to deploy almost all the time, because you don't have to wait for all these other PRs to catch up or whatever. That PR is a separate feature that can be merged into master at any time that the client signs off on it.
The other like CI tools that's competing against are mostly like around automated testing, but we just feel like most of what we do is not like, some of it's really complicated and needs like functional testing, but a lot of it is just like
How's
going
this
back
look?
and forth with the client about they don't like the way it looks.
Yeah,
And-
just change the blue.
Right.
Right?
So that, there's no automated testing that's going to fix that.
No.
So
This saves you from going into demo day and be like, you get all these feedback notes and you have to create all these tickets.
yeah,
You're kind of getting to avoid that by saying, here, before we merge this,
right.
we want everybody's sign off. And I've also
Like let's
noticed,
do like review during the whole process,
Yeah.
not just all at the end, and then all of a sudden we have no budget left for it.
and some Jason touched on earlier that I find these tools are useful for is way, way less complicated deploys. Like, you're not spending 5 hours the day of a deploy because they're a bug goes out. Everybody's constantly seeing every bit of code.
Yeah, because
going through.
we don't even really use Git, so this is just all like, it's horrible. And
Jason, the first thing he said is, if you're not using
No, but
Git,
yeah,
you gotta
yeah.
use
I
Git.
thought you.
But-
I found him. I found one.
Yeah. It's horrible. And so what happens is I build up a site,
Yeah.
and then we do internal testing, and then they say, well, what about deployment? And I'm like, no, we need to, I need to.
All right, thanks, guys.
It's a surprise.
You knew you were